He ruled an empire built on fear. She disappeared with his legacy inside her. 7 years later, at a wedding he never wanted to attend, 3 identical faces stared back at him, mirror images of the man he'd become. She smiled like she held all the cards. And for the first time in his life, the most powerful man in the underworld had no control. This is the story of a crime lord who thought he'd lost everything, until the night his past walked back in, holding his entire future in her hands. Welcome to the Dawn's hidden heirs. Welcome back, beautiful souls. Today's Afro-Korean story will shake your heart in the best way possible. I'm so close to 1,000 subscribers. Help me reach this dream by hitting that subscribe button right now. Your support means everything, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Now let's dive into a tale of hidden truths and second chances. The wedding was a cathedral of whispers and champagne lies. Jaewon Kim stood at the back of the venue like a shadow in an expensive suit, watching his best friend marry someone who actually believed in happy endings. He didn't belong here. Men like him didn't attend celebrations. They hosted them, controlled them, used them as stages for power plays hidden behind crystal glasses and polite smiles. But Minho had asked, and Jaewon owed him more than he could ever repay. So he came alone. His security waited outside, invisible threads of protection he didn't need but couldn't refuse. At 29, he'd inherited an empire his father built on blood and his grandfather carved from the bones of old soul. Now in the gleaming towers of New York, the Kim family didn't just exist in the underworld, they owned it. Real estate that laundered money cleaner than churches washed sins. Nightclubs where secrets traded hands faster than cocaine. Politicians who answered his calls before their own mothers. Power was his birthright. Loneliness was the price. The ceremony began with violins and vows. Jaewon's mind drifted to deals unsigned, rivals growing bold, territories that needed reminding who held the leash. He checked his watch. 2 hours. He could survive 2 hours of pretending normalcy didn't hurt. Then she walked in. Not down the aisle. Through the side entrance reserved for latecomers and people who didn't want to be seen. But Yara Okoye had never been invisible. Even now, 7 years after she'd vanished from his life like smoke through his fingers, she moved through space like it owed her an apology. She wore amber, the color of autumn fires and ancient gold, wrapped around a body he'd once known better than his own heartbeat. Her skin glowed against the fabric, deep, rich brown that reminded him of earth after rain, of warmth he'd spent years trying to forget. Her hair, thick coils pinned up in elegant defiance, framed a face that time had only made more devastating. And she wasn't alone. 3 little girls followed her like ducklings in matching cream dresses. Identical. Perfect. 7 years old, if he had to guess. They moved with her same grace, their dark curls bouncing, their eyes scanning the room with curiosity that hadn't yet learned fear. Jaewon's world tilted. The youngest stumbled on the carpet. Yara's hand shot out, steadying her with practiced ease, whispering something that made all 3 giggle. They found seats near the back, near him. Too near. Close enough that when Yara finally looked up and met his gaze across 4 rows of wedding guests, he could see the challenge burning in her dark eyes. She smiled. Not the soft smile he remembered from university, when she'd been an exchange student from Nigeria studying international law, and he'd been pretending his last name didn't carry the weight of corpses. This smile had edges. This smile knew exactly what it was doing. The girls turned to look at what held their mother's attention. 3 pairs of eyes landed on him. Dark brown irises ringed with amber. His mother's eyes, his grandfather's eyes, the Kim family curse of seeing too much and feeling too little. Except these eyes were soft, curious, innocent in ways he'd forgotten existed. One of them waved. Jaewon's hand lifted before his brain caught up. He waved back, the gesture foreign and ridiculous and completely involuntary. The girl beamed. Her sisters elbowed her, whispering behind tiny hands, glancing between him and their mother like they were solving a puzzle. Yara's smile widened. She turned back to face the ceremony, dismissing him as easily as she'd once left him, her posture screaming satisfaction. He couldn't breathe. The minister droned about love and commitment. Minho kissed his bride. People applauded. Jaewon sat frozen, his mind doing math that didn't need calculating. 7 years ago, Yara had broken up with him over a voicemail. No explanation. No goodbye. Just her voice, steady and final, telling him they wanted different things. He'd tried to find her, called every number, visited her apartment, asked friends who suddenly knew nothing. She'd erased herself from his life so completely, he'd almost convinced himself she'd been a dream. He'd buried himself in the family business after that. Became the heir his father always wanted. Ruthless, efficient, empty. Now she sat 12 feet away with 3 daughters who had his eyes. The reception blurred. Jaewon moved through congratulations and small talk like an automaton, his attention locked on the table where Yara sat, relaxed and radiant, laughing with old university friends who'd somehow stayed in touch with her. The girls ate cake with the focused intensity of children who'd been promised dessert for good behavior. They were beautiful. Painfully, impossibly beautiful. And they were his. He knew it the way he knew rain before it fell, the way he knew when someone was lying, the way he'd known 7 years ago in a campus library that Yara Okoye would either save him or destroy him. She'd chosen destruction. Now she was back. Minho found him by the bar, still glowing with newlywed optimism. "You good, man? You look like you've seen a ghost." Something like that. Jaewon's voice came out steady. Years of negotiating with men who'd kill him for showing weakness had taught him to hide earthquakes behind calm. "Yara made it," Minho said casually. Too casually. "Didn't think she would. She's been living in London, apparently. Came back last month. Said she wouldn't miss this for the world. London, a whole ocean away. Smart." "The girls?" Jaewon asked, his tone carefully neutral. Minho's expression shifted. Understanding flickered, then something like pity. "She didn't tell you." It wasn't a question. Jaewon drained his whiskey. "We should catch up. The 4 of us, like old times." "Jay." Minho started, then stopped. He knew better than to push. "Yeah, that'd be good." Across the room, Yara laughed at something someone said. Her head tilted back, her throat exposed. She looked free. Happy. Complete without him. The youngest girl. He needed to learn their names. Christ. He needed to know everything. Tugged on Yara's dress, pointing at the dance floor where other children spun in chaotic circles. Yara nodded. All 3 girls squealed and ran off, their cream dresses fluttering like wings. And Yara looked directly at him. This time she didn't smile. She stood, smoothed her amber dress, and walked toward him with the slow, deliberate pace of someone who'd already won the war. Guests parted without realizing why. Some ancient instinct recognizing the moment before collision. She stopped 3 feet away. Close enough to smell her perfume. Something new, warm and spiced. Not the soft vanilla she'd worn before. Close enough to see the tiny lines around her eyes, proof that time had touched her too. Close enough to make his heart remember it was still capable of breaking. "Jaewon," she said, his name a complete sentence. "Yara." He matched her tone, gave nothing away. They stood there. 2 people who'd once shared everything, now strangers wearing familiar faces. The band played something slow and romantic. Children laughed. The world continued, oblivious. "They're beautiful," he said finally. "I know." "Are they mine?" Her smile returned, sharp, victorious. "What do you think?" "I think you owe me an explanation." "I owe you nothing." But her voice softened slightly. "We need to talk. Not here, not now, but soon. Tomorrow. Next week, I have things to arrange. Tomorrow, Yara, or I make the arrangements." Something dangerous flashed in her eyes. "You don't threaten me anymore, Jaewon." "I'm not the girl you remember. I'm not scared of your name or your family or your empire built on other people's fear." "I wasn't threatening." He stepped closer, close enough to lower his voice to the intimate register he'd once used to tell her he loved her. "I was begging." That landed. Her breath caught, just slightly, just enough. "Tomorrow," she agreed. "But you come alone. No bodyguards, no games, just you." "Where?" she told him. A coffee shop in Brooklyn he'd never heard of, far from his world, deep in hers. Then she walked away, back to her friends, back to her laughter, leaving him standing by the bar with a truth that rewrote his entire past. The girls ran back to their mother, breathless and glowing. The middle one grabbed Yara's hand and whispered something. Yara glanced at him again, then nodded. All three girls turned and waved. He waved back, his hand steadier this time. Minho materialized beside him. So that's what had you looking like, Death? I have daughters. Yeah, man. I figured that out about 5 minutes after Yara showed up at university reunions 2 years ago. She never said anything, but... He trailed off. They have your eyes. Why didn't you tell me? Not my story to tell. And honestly, I thought maybe she had a reason. Jaewon watched the four of them, a perfect unit he'd never been part of, and felt something crack inside his chest. Not his heart. That had broken 7 years ago. This was something deeper, the shell he'd built around the broken pieces. I'm their father, he said, testing the words. They felt impossible, terrifying. Right. Yeah, Minho said quietly. Now you have to figure out what kind of father you want to be. The kind your dad was, or something different. His father. The man who'd taught him that love was weakness and family was leverage. Who'd died 3 years ago in his sleep, peacefully, despite the bodies he'd stacked to build his kingdom. Who'd never once told Jaewon he was proud, only that he was necessary. Jaewon looked at his daughters, dancing now with other children, their laughter cutting through the sophisticated murmur of the reception. They didn't know him, didn't know what his name meant in rooms where light didn't reach. Didn't know their grandfather had been a monster, and their father was trying desperately not to become the same. Something different, he whispered. The reception ended. Guests departed. Yara gathered her daughters with the efficient grace of a woman who'd been a mother for 7 years without him. She bundled them into coats, collected tiny purses, kissed Minho and his bride goodbye. She didn't look at Jaewon again. She didn't have to. Tomorrow, she'd said, in Brooklyn, in her territory. He'd be there, and everything would change. Again. The coffee shop was a revelation in ordinariness. Jaewon arrived 15 minutes early, alone as promised, in a car service that dropped him 2 blocks away. No security detail, no driver waiting. Just him and the autumn air that smelled like fallen leaves and distant rain. He felt naked without his armor of men and reputation, but this was Yara's condition. Her world, her rules. The shop was called Blessed Beans, a name that would have made his associates laugh. Inside, mismatched furniture created cozy chaos. Local art covered brick walls. A chalkboard menu listed drinks with names like Resurrection Roast and Hallelujah Honey Latte. Gospel music played softly under the hum of conversation. Everyone here was black, brown, beautifully relaxed in a space that belonged to them. He stood out like blood on snow. A few heads turned, eyes assessed, dismissed, or lingered with curiosity. He ordered black coffee from a teenager who called him baby, and didn't recognize that his watch cost more than her year's salary. He found a table in the back, facing the door, old habits, and waited. Yara arrived exactly on time. She wore jeans and a burnt orange sweater that made her skin luminous. Her hair fell in natural coils around her shoulders, free and wild. No makeup, no armor. Just Yara, more herself than he'd ever seen her, walking through a room where she clearly belonged. She hugged the barista, laughed with a regular, ordered something complicated involving oat milk and cinnamon. Then she turned and met his gaze, her smile fading into something more complicated. She sat across from him without ceremony. You came, she said. Did you think I wouldn't? I thought maybe you'd send someone, or show up with your whole entourage. Make a statement. You asked me to come alone, and you listened. She studied him like he was a puzzle missing pieces. That's new. A lot is new, Yara. Her coffee arrived. She thanked the barista by name, Destiny, and wrapped her hands around the mug like it was prayer. For a moment, neither spoke. The shop buzzed around them, oblivious to the bomb about to detonate. Their names, Jaewon said finally. I need to know their names. Yara's expression softened. Naomi, Zara, Amara, in that order. Naomi's the oldest by 6 minutes. Zara's the middle, cautious and brilliant. Amara's my wild one, born laughing. He repeated the names silently, committing them to memory alongside every other vital thing he'd ever needed to remember. They're 7. 7 years, 4 months, 13 days. Math he'd already done. You were pregnant when you left. Yes. And you didn't tell me. No. Why? The question came out harsher than intended. He gentled his voice. Why didn't you tell me, Yara? I deserve to know. She set down her mug. Did you? The man you were becoming? The one who came home with blood on his knuckles and lies in his eyes? The one whose father was teaching him to rule through fear? That man deserved to know he was about to be a father. The words hit like bullets, accurate, lethal. I loved you, he said quietly. I know, and I loved you. That's why I left. She leaned forward, her eyes fierce. You were drowning, Jaewon. I watched you disappear into that family, into that life. Every day, a little less of the boy I fell for and a little more of the man your father wanted. I couldn't save you. And I couldn't let my daughters grow up in that world. So you decided for all of us. Yes, I did. Because someone had to. Her voice cracked slightly. You think it was easy? Finding out I was pregnant a week after breaking your heart? Sitting in a London clinic at 19, terrified and alone, listening to 3 heartbeats and realizing I'd have to raise them without you? You weren't alone. You could have called. And you would have what? Left the family? Walked away from your father, your legacy, everything you were being groomed for? She shook her head. You would have tried to make it work. Would have split yourself between 2 worlds. And eventually your father would have used us. Used our daughters. Turned them into leverage, into pressure points, into weapons. He wanted to argue, couldn't. She was right. His father would have absolutely used them. Would have seen them as tools for shaping his heir, for ensuring loyalty, for building dynasty. The old man had turned Jaewon's whole life into a series of strategic moves. What chance would 3 innocent girls have had? He's dead now, Jaewon said. 3 years ago, heart attack. Yara's face registered surprise, then something like sympathy. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm not. Jaewon. Why come back now? He cut through the sympathy he didn't want. Why bring them to New York? Why let me see them if you were so determined to keep them from me? She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing patterns on her mug. Outside, Brooklyn moved through its ordinary Friday rhythm. Inside, time held its breath. Because they started asking questions, she said finally. About their father. About why they didn't have one when their friends did. About why we lived so far away from family. She looked up, her eyes shining. And because 7 years ago I made a choice for survival. But they deserve more than my fear. They deserve the truth. Which is that their father is complicated, powerful, dangerous maybe, but that he loved me once, truly, and that if he'd known about them, he would have moved mountains. She paused. Would have, Jaewon, past tense. I don't know who you are now. I don't either, he admitted. The honesty surprised them both. My father's death freed me in some ways. I run things differently. Less blood, more business. But the empire's still there. The name still carries weight. People still fear me. Do you want them to? The question stung because he didn't know the answer. Fear had always been power's shadow. Without it, what did he have? I want to know my daughters, he said instead. I want to be part of their lives, however that looks. Yara studied him for a long time. He let her. Let her see whatever she needed to see. The man he was, the boy he'd been, the father he desperately wanted to become. Okay, she said finally. But we do this my way. Slow. Careful. They don't need to know yet that you're their father. They think you're just someone I knew. A friend. We build trust first. How long? As long as it takes. Every instinct screamed to push back, to demand his rights, to use his power to take what was his. But Yara's eyes held a warning and a promise. Play by her rules, or lose them all. Okay, he agreed. Your way. She smiled then, the first real smile since sitting down. Thank you. They talked for another hour. Not about the past or the empire or the 7 years between them, about the girls, their personalities, their quirks, their dreams. Naomi wanted to be a doctor. Zara loved mathematics and poetry in equal measure. Amara wanted to save every animal and dance in every room. Jaewon absorbed every detail like air. When they finally left, the sun had shifted gold. Yara walked him to the door, close enough that he could smell her shampoo, coconut and she, homey and sweet. Same time next week? She offered. You can meet them properly, as a friend. I'd like that. They stood on the threshold, autumn wind playing with her hair. For a moment, he was 19 again, standing outside her dorm, terrified to kiss her and terrified not to. Yara, he said, I'm sorry. For whatever I was becoming. For not being someone you could tell. For all of it. Her hand touched his arm, brief and warm. We were kids, Jaewon, playing at adult choices. Maybe now we get a chance to do better. Maybe. She left first, walking down the Brooklyn street like she owned the sun. He watched until she turned the corner, then pulled out his phone. His driver appeared within minutes. The city blurred past. And Jaewon sat in the back seat thinking about 3 daughters who had his eyes and their mother's strength, and wondering if 7 years too late could ever become just in time. The next week crawled. Jaewon threw himself into work with unusual intensity, partly to stop time from moving like honey, partly to prove he could still function when his entire world had tilted. Meetings with casino operators, negotiations with union reps who looked the other way on questionable shipments. A sit-down with the Italians over disputed territory in Queens that ended with handshakes and unspoken threats. Business as usual. Except nothing felt usual anymore. He caught himself online at 2 a.m. searching, what do 7-year-old girls like, and feeling ridiculous. Toys, books, experiences. He had no reference point. His own childhood had been violin lessons and etiquette training, prep school brutality, and his father's cold assessment of whether he was worthy of the name Kim. He bought gifts anyway, carefully chosen, obsessively researched, a medical kit for Naomi with real stethoscope, a collection of poetry books and mathematical puzzles for Zara, an art set and stuffed animals for Amara. He had them wrapped, then unwrapped, then rewrapped, uncertain if friend from mother's past brought gifts or if that crossed some unspoken boundary. His second-in-command, Marcus, found him one evening surrounded by wrapped boxes in his penthouse office. Boss, Marcus said carefully. You having a breakdown I should know about? Jaewon looked up from the purple ribbon he'd been attempting to tie. I have daughters. Marcus blinked. Come again? 3 of them. Triplets, 7 years old, I just found out. To his credit, Marcus recovered quickly. Well, shit. Congratulations. I'm meeting them tomorrow, as a friend. Not as their father, not yet. Marcus sat down, his massive frame making the designer chair creak. Former military, loyal to death, the only person Jaewon fully trusted. You need advice or just someone to witness this crisis? Is it obvious I'm panicking? You've retied that ribbon 6 times. Jaewon dropped the ribbon. I don't know how to be a father. My own father taught me how to instill fear and count money. That's it. Then don't be him, Marcus said simply. Be you. The version that had me drive you to a Brooklyn coffee shop with no backup. The version that's buying. He squinted at the boxes. Educational gifts instead of designer clothes. You're already different. What if different isn't enough? Man, those girls have survived 7 years without you. The bar's literally on the ground. Just show up. Be honest. Don't lie to them. Sound advice. Impossible advice. How did you show up honestly when your whole life was built on strategic deception? The next day arrived with cruel punctuality. Yara had suggested a park. Prospect Park, she'd texted. The playground near the boathouse. 2 p.m., casual, public, safe. Jaewon arrived early again, watching from a distance as children swarmed the playground like beautiful chaos. Parents clustered on benches, scrolling phones or chatting, half attentive to the squeals and laughter. Normal Saturday afternoon, normal families, normal everything. Then he saw them. 3 identical girls in different colored jackets, purple, yellow, green, racing each other to the swings. Yara followed at a leisurely pace, her hands in her pockets, her face tilted toward autumn sun. She looked peaceful, complete, a world unto herself that didn't need him. His chest tightened. Naomi reached the swings first, claiming victory with a whoop. Zara arrived second, philosophical about defeat. Amara came in last, distracted by a dog she'd stopped to pet. They were so distinct, despite identical faces. He could tell them apart now. Purple jacket methodical, yellow jacket thoughtful, green jacket wonderstruck. His daughters. Yara spotted him and waved. He walked over, suddenly aware of how wrong his clothes were. tailored slacks and a cashmere sweater, too formal for playground dirt and autumn wind. The girls stopped mid-swing, watching him approach with unguarded curiosity. "Girls," Yara said, her voice warm and easy. "This is Jaewon. He's an old friend of mine from university. Jaewon, meet Naomi, Zara, and Amara." "Hi," they chorused, a three-part harmony of identical voices pitched slightly different. Jaewon crouched down to their level, something instinctive overriding years of maintaining height advantage. "Hi. It's really nice to meet you all." Amara in green tilted her head. "You talk funny." "Amara." Yara's voice carried gentle reproach. "It's okay." Jaewon smiled. "I was born in Korea. Sometimes my accent shows up when I'm nervous." "Why are you nervous?" Naomi asked, direct and fearless in purple. "Because meeting new people is always a little scary, even for adults." Zara, in yellow, studied him with unnerving intensity. "You have eyes like us." The observation landed like a stone in still water. Yara's expression flickered. Surprise, pride, warning. Jaewon held Zara's gaze, seeing himself reflected in miniature, seeing his mother, his grandfather, the whole weight of genetic legacy in a 7-year-old's face. "I do," he said simply. "That's interesting, isn't it? Mom says we got our eyes from our dad," Amara offered helpfully. "But we've never met him." The world stopped. Yara's hand touched Amara's shoulder, gentle but firm. "How about you show Jaewon how high you can swing? I bet he's never seen anyone swing as high as you three." Crisis averted. The girls scrambled back to the swings, arguing over who could go higher. Jaewon stood slowly, meeting Yara's eyes. "They're smart," he said quietly. Terrifyingly so. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Zara especially. She notices everything. They watched the girls swing higher, their laughter cutting through the October air. Other children joined them, and soon it was a contest of height and bravery. Naomi pushed limits. Zara calculated angles. Amara just laughed, pure joy in motion. "I brought gifts," Jaewon said. "In the car. I wasn't sure if—" "That's sweet, but maybe not today. Let them get to know you first. Otherwise it feels like you're trying to buy affection." He winced. She was right. Of course she was right. "Tell me about them," he said instead. "Everything. I want to know everything." So she did. Standing there in autumn sunlight while their daughters played, Yara told him 7 years of stories he'd missed. First words, Naomi said no, Zara said why, Amara said cookie. First steps, all on the same day holding each other up. First day of school, Naomi marched in fearlessly. Zara cried for an hour. Amara made 5 friends immediately. Every story was a knife and a gift. Evidence of all he'd lost. Proof that they'd thrived without him. "You did this alone," he said when she paused. "Not entirely alone. My parents helped. My sister. Friends in London. It takes a village, and I had one. Still, you were 19. 3 babies. No partner." He looked at her. Really looked. "You're incredible." She ducked her head, almost shy. "I did what I had to. What any mother would." "No, not any mother. You." The moment stretched. Something old and familiar hummed between them. Memory of what they'd been. Ghost of what they'd lost. Then Amara shouted, "Mom, watch!" And the spell broke. The afternoon unfolded in unexpected ease. The girls warmed to him gradually, asking questions with the blunt honesty of children. "What do you do?" "Business." "What kind?" "Complicated business." "Do you have kids?" "That's complicated too." "Why don't you smile more?" Because he'd forgotten how, though he didn't say that. He pushed them on swings, helped Zara across monkey bars she was determined to conquer despite fear. Listened to Naomi explain in excruciating detail how vaccines work. Held Amara's collection of special rocks while she found more. And slowly, terrifyingly, he felt something crack open in his chest. Not breaking. Opening. Like a door he'd welded shut was remembering how hinges worked. When the sun started its descent, painting everything gold, Yara gathered her daughters with practiced efficiency. "Say goodbye to Jaewon, girls. We need to get home for dinner." "Can he come?" Amara asked immediately. "Not tonight, baby." "But when?" Naomi demanded. Yara glanced at Jaewon, a question in her eyes. He nodded, probably too eagerly. Maybe next weekend, Yara said, if Jaewon wants to. I want to, he said. To the girls, to Yara, to himself. Very much. They left in a flurry of hugs for their mother and shy waves for him. He watched them walk away, 3 identical heads bent together, already discussing the afternoon in their secret triplet language. Yara looked back once, her expression unreadable. Then they were gone, and he was alone in a playground as families packed up for dinner, as ordinary life continued around him, as his phone buzzed with messages from his world, the real world, the one that didn't include swings and special rocks. He ignored them all. That night, alone in his penthouse that suddenly felt less like a castle and more like a cage, Jaewon stood at floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. His empire spread below in lights and shadow. Buildings he owned, businesses he controlled, territory he'd fought to keep, power, legacy, everything his father had built and he'd inherited. And for the first time in his life, it all felt small. He thought about 3 girls in colored jackets, about their mother who'd chosen them over him 7 years ago and had been absolutely right to do so, about the version of himself that had driven her away, cold, becoming cruel, drowning in his father's expectations. His phone buzzed again. Marcus. Yeah, Jaewon answered. How'd it go? They're perfect. Marcus laughed. Course they are. They're yours. I was a shit person 7 years ago, Marcus. Yara was right to leave. Maybe. But that was then. Question is, who are you now? Jaewon looked at his reflection in the window glass. Saw his father's face, his grandfather's eyes, the weight of generation after generation of men who'd chosen power over everything else. And he saw 3 little girls who had those same eyes, but used them to notice special rocks and calculate monkey bar physics, and ask why grown-ups looked sad. I don't know yet, he admitted. But I want to be someone they'd be proud to know. Then be that person. After hanging up, Jaewon did something he hadn't done in 3 years. He called his mother, still living in Seoul, still maintaining the appearance of Kim family respectability while quietly hating everything the name represented. Jaewon? Her voice carried surprise. They spoke quarterly at most. Duty, not affection. I have daughters, he said in Korean. 3 of them, 7 years old. Silence. Then softly. Tell me everything. So he did. And his mother cried and laughed and said things in Korean about second chances and breaking cycles and how his father would have used those girls as pawns, but Jaewon didn't have to be his father. Be better, she whispered. Be what he never was. I'm going to try. Then you're already better, my son. Already better. The next morning, Jaewon woke with purpose he hadn't felt in years. He had a week until he'd see them again. A week to start becoming someone worth knowing. Someone who could stand in playgrounds without feeling like an imposter. Someone who could be a father instead of just a crime lord's heir. It wasn't enough time. It would never be enough time. But it was what he had, and for 3 girls with his eyes and their mother's smile, he'd make it count. The forbidden line wasn't between him and Yara anymore. It was between who he'd been and who he needed to become. And for the first time since inheriting an empire built on fear, Jaewon Kim was ready to cross it. The week crawled between 2 worlds. Jaewon handled business with precision. Shipment disputes resolved with phone calls. Rivals reminded why they shouldn't test boundaries. Money moved through accounts like rivers finding ocean, clean and untraceable. His empire purred along, efficient and ruthless, but nights belonged to research. He read parenting books Marcus brought with barely concealed amusement, watched videos about child development, learned that 7-year-olds needed consistency, honesty, patience, things his father never gave him. Wednesday changed everything. The girls want you at Naomi's science fair Friday, Yara said when she called. She's presenting about the human heart, asked if mom's friend with sad eyes could come. Sad eyes. Children saw everything. I'll be there. Friday arrived dressed in rain. PS 321 was chaos and magic. Children's art covering walls. The gym transformed into wonder. Poster boards and volcanoes, solar systems made of foam balls, baking soda experiments exploding in rainbows. He found them. 3 girls in white shirts and khaki skirts, scanning the crowd. Amara spotted him first, face lighting up like sunrise. Naomi grabbed his hand and dragged him to her display. A detailed heart diagram, clay model painted red and blue, ambitious if not entirely accurate. "This is amazing," he said, meaning it. She launched into explanations about ventricles and blood flow, stumbling over words but carried by passion. When she finished, breathless, he applauded like she'd explained the universe's secrets. Maybe she had. They got ice cream after. Squeezed into a corner booth, girls arguing about cats versus dogs while Jaewon mediated with diplomatic skill that would have impressed his associates. Amara leaned across the table, ice cream on her nose. "Do you have a family?" Time stopped. "I'm building something," he said carefully. "Here, with people I care about." Later, outside in gleaming rain-washed streets, Yara kissed his cheek. Brief, soft, devastating. "Good night, Jaewon." He stood there long after her car disappeared, rain soaking through his sweater, texting Marcus. "I'm in love with my own life for the first time ever." Some wars you fight with guns and fear, others with ice cream and hope. Saturdays became sacred. Jaewon cleared his calendar without explanation, earning puzzled looks from associates. He didn't care. Saturdays meant parks, museums, the aquarium where Amara pressed against glass, and Naomi questioned marine biologists. He learned their rhythms. Zara needed quiet. Naomi craved challenge. Amara required constant motion. He adjusted, becoming fluent in a language he'd never known. But secrets have weight. Marcus confronted him late November. "You're running a criminal empire while playing house with your secret family. People notice. You're vulnerable. What's your point?" "Eventually you choose. This life or that one. They can't coexist forever." Before Jaewon could answer, his phone rang. Unknown number. "Detective Sarah Chen, NYPD, investigating connections between your family's businesses." He hung up. Blood went cold. That night, he couldn't sleep. At dawn, Yara texted, "Parents visiting for Thanksgiving. Want you to meet them." Her father pulled him aside after dinner. "You're the father." Not a question. "Yes, sir." Yara left because you were becoming someone she couldn't let her daughters know. "And now?" "Now I'm trying to be someone they'd be proud of." "Trying isn't being." "No, sir." Her father smiled, sad. "At least you're honest. But those girls are magic. Dim their light and you'll answer to me." Later, Yara and Jaewon sat on her worn couch, tea cold between them. "I need to tell them soon," she said, "about who you are." "There are things about my life you don't know," he admitted. "Things that might change your mind." He told her, the family business, illegal operations, money from dark places, the detective's call. The reality his name carried consequences. She listened without interrupting. "I knew," she said finally. "Not details, but I knew. I left to protect them. But they're 7 now. They exist. I'm tired of running." "What are you saying?" "I want to tell them. But promise me something. Promise you'll choose them over your empire." The impossible choice, finally spoken. He thought about his father, who always chose power. About 3 girls with unlimited futures. "I promise. I'll choose them. Every time." Yara kissed him, like coming home. They told the girls on a Sunday morning in Yara's living room, hot chocolate and nervous energy filling the space. "We have something important to tell you," Yara began, her voice steady despite trembling hands. "Are you guys dating?" Naomi asked immediately. "Because you keep looking at each other weird," Zara added. "And you hold hands sometimes," Amara finished. Jaewon almost laughed. Almost. "It's bigger than that," Yara said. "Remember how you've asked about your father? About why you have 3 moms at school events but no dad?" 3 heads nodded, suddenly serious. "Well," Yara took a breath, "Jaewon is your father." Silence. Complete, stunning silence. Then Naomi. "Really?" "Really," Jaewon said, his voice rough with emotion. "Why didn't you tell us before?" Zara, always analytical. "Because we wanted to make sure everything was right," Yara explained. "That Jaewon and I could be friends again first. That you could know him before knowing who he was to you." "But now we're telling you," Jaewon continued, "because you deserve the truth, and because I want to be part of your lives. Officially. If you'll let me." More silence. The girls looked at each other, having one of their silent triplet conversations that always unnerved adults. Finally, Amara spoke. "So you're our dad?" "Yes." "And you want to be our dad, like for real, not just visiting?" "For real, forever, if you want that." "Do we have to call you Dad?" Naomi asked, practical even in emotional moments. "You can call me whatever feels right. Jaewon is fine, or Dad, or anything in between. Can we think about it?" Zara, ever careful with her heart. "Take all the time you need." They thought about it for approximately 30 seconds. Then Amara launched herself at him, wrapping small arms around his neck with the force of 7 years of wanting. "I always wanted a dad." Naomi joined, more reserved but present, her hug fierce despite her caution. Zara held back, watching, processing with those devastating eyes that saw too much. Jaewon looked at Yara over their daughters' heads, tears streaming down both their faces, and felt something fundamental shift in the universe. This was his family. His actual family. Not the crime syndicate he'd inherited. Not the empire built on fear and blood. But this. 3 girls who shared his eyes, and a woman who'd loved him enough to leave him. Later, when her sisters were distracted with a movie, Zara approached him alone. "I have questions," she said, her voice small but determined. "I'll answer whatever I can. Why weren't you there before, when we were babies?" The hardest question. The one he'd dreaded since the moment Yara suggested telling them. "Your mom and I loved each other very much," he said carefully, crouching to her level. "But I was becoming someone not very good. Someone she was right to protect you from. She left to keep you safe, to give you a chance at a normal childhood. And now? Now I'm trying every day to be someone worthy of being your father. I won't always get it right. I'll make mistakes, but I'll always try. I'll always show up. I promise you that." Zara studied him with an intensity that reminded him of negotiating with men 3 times her age. Finally, she nodded. "Okay, you can be our dad. But you have to prove you'll stay." "I will. I promise." She walked away then, satisfied with his answer, and Jaewon felt like he'd just won the most important negotiation of his life. The next months transformed everything. Jaewon restructured his entire world, delegated more authority to Marcus. Started legitimate businesses, real ones, clean ones that his daughters could be proud of. Began the slow, dangerous process of extracting himself from the family's darker operations. It cost him. Allies questioned his commitment. Rivals sensed weakness and pushed boundaries. Old associates whispered that love had made him soft. His mother, when he told her what he was doing, wept with relief and pride. He moved into a brownstone in Brooklyn, close to Yara and the girls, but separate. They needed time, space to build this new family slowly, carefully, without rushing into something that might break under pressure. Weekends became official custody time. The girls stayed Friday through Sunday, learning his apartment, filling it with their chaos and laughter and arguments over nothing. He learned to braid hair, though badly, to check homework and understand new math that made no sense, to mediate fights about whose turn it was to pick the movie, to read 3 different bedtime stories because they each wanted their own. It was exhausting. It was perfect. It was everything he never knew he needed. Yara kept her distance romantically, letting him build individual relationships with the girls without complicating things. But sometimes, when he dropped them off Sunday nights, she'd smile at him in a way that promised maybe, eventually, they'd find their way back to each other. He could wait. He'd waited 7 years already. What was a little longer? But danger doesn't wait for anyone. In March, Detective Chen called again, this time with a warrant. They raided his office on a Wednesday morning. Found nothing. He'd cleaned everything months ago. Anticipated exactly this move. But the message was clear. They were watching, waiting, building a case. That night, after the girls were asleep at his place, he called Yara. "We need to talk, now." She came over, concern etched in every line of her face. They sat in his kitchen, tea growing cold between them like it always did during hard conversations. He told her everything. The investigation, the risks, the reality that being associated with him might bring unwanted attention to her and the girls. That his past wasn't as buried as he'd hoped. "I'll understand if you want distance," he said quietly. "I can still be their father." But quietly, carefully. Whatever keeps you safe. Yara listened to everything. Then she reached across the table and took his hand, her grip strong and sure. Do you remember what I asked you? At Thanksgiving? To choose them over the Empire. And have you? I'm trying, selling off properties, ending contracts, going legitimate. But it's slow, dangerous. People don't let you just walk away from this life. I know, but you're trying. That's what matters. She squeezed his hand. We're in this together now, Jae-won. All of us. Whatever comes. Yes, you're sure? I ran once to protect them. I won't run again. We fight. Together. He pulled her close then, kissing her like he'd wanted to for months, feeling 7 years of loneliness shatter against the reality of her in his arms again. I love you, he whispered against her hair, never stopped. I know. I love you too. Even when I hated you, I loved you. The investigation continued through spring. Jae-won cooperated where he could, gave them enough to chase real criminals while protecting his family. The Kim empire shrank, transformed, became something his father wouldn't recognize. Something clean. Something his daughters could inherit without shame. And through it all, he was happy. Genuinely, impossibly happy. 1 year after telling the girls the truth, in the same park where he'd first met them properly, Jae-won knelt in spring grass while 3 girls watched with knowing smiles, and Yara's hand trembled in his. 7 years ago, you were right to leave, he said, his voice carrying across the small crowd that had gathered. I wasn't who you needed, who they needed. But I'm trying now, every day, to be better, to be worthy. And I'm asking if you'll let me keep trying, as your husband, as their father, as whatever we build together. Yes, Yara whispered, tears streaming. Yes, always yes. The girls cheered. Amara loudest, Naomi with fierce pride, Zara with a smile that said she'd calculated this outcome months ago. Other park-goers applauded, strangers celebrating love they'd witnessed unfold. And Jae-won Kim, former heir to a criminal empire, slipped a ring onto the finger of the woman who'd saved him by leaving him, surrounded by the daughters who'd redeemed him simply by existing. His old empire crumbled behind him. His new one flourished ahead, built not on fear but on love, not on power but on promise. Not on who he'd been, but on who he'd become. And every night, tucking in 3 sleeping girls and kissing his fiancée goodnight, he thought about his father's life of lonely power and knew, with absolute certainty, that he'd chosen right. Some empires are worth burning, others are worth building from scratch. His was just beginning. The end.